The modern Indian constitution is a massive, intricate piece of democratic engineering, the culmination of a 175-year iterative process of trial, error, and administrative reform. This administrative machinery originated as a series of emergency interventions. In the late 1700s, the British Parliament stepped in to regulate the East India Company, which had expanded territory rapidly while facing internal corruption and financial collapse. To grasp the constitutional history required for the UPSC, we must track the deliberate shift of power from a profit-driven corporate ledger to a sovereign democratic framework. Navigating the UPSC prelims requires a precise understanding of the chronological sequence of these British acts, as the exam often tests the exact order of legislative evolution. This sequence provides the timeline framework from 1773 to 1950. Remember the string RPCCCGCCGGI. These letters correspond to specific eras: regulating, Pitts, charter, government, councils, and the Independence Act. This timeline serves as the structural backbone of our study. Every major constitutional development we discuss will map directly to one of these nodes. We begin at the letter R, 1773. Faced with systemic company corruption, Parliament passed the Regulating Act. This established the first step towards central administration and created a Supreme Court in Calcutta. The act restructured the hierarchy, elevating the Governor of Bengal over the presidencies of Bombay and Madras. Warren Hastings became the first to hold this new title, Governor-General of Bengal. By 1784, the P in our sequence, Pitt's India Act, addressed the 1773 Act's weaknesses. It introduced dual control, splitting governance into two streams: a board of control for political affairs and a court of directors for trade. The 1813 Charter Act represents the next major shift. It largely ended the company's trade monopoly in India, though the company retained its trade in tea and commerce with China. Centralization reached its peak with the 1833 Charter Act. The company became purely an administrative body, ending all commercial activities. Lord William Bentinck was elevated to Governor-General of India, centralizing all civil and military power under a single office. By 1833, the British had successfully re-engineered a trading corporation into a centralized administrative instrument for imperial rule. The 1853 Charter Act served as the final charter, notably separating legislative and executive functions and introducing open competition for the civil services. However, the Revolt of 1857 created a massive structural rupture. It demonstrated that corporate governance was no longer sustainable for maintaining control over India. In response, the Government of India Act of 1858 abolished the East India Company. Absolute power was transferred to the British Crown, to be exercised by the Secretary of State for India. Under this act, the Governor-General became the Viceroy, the direct representative of the Crown. Charles Canning was the first to assume this role. This 1858 shift replaced corporate-led centralization with direct imperial state authority. The subsequent Council Acts of 1861 and 1892 began a cautious process of decentralization, allowing for the limited, indirect entry of Indians into legislative councils. The 1909 Morley-Minto reforms introduced a significant change: separate electorates for Muslims. This legislative decision institutionalized religious division within the electoral system, a factor that intensified the communal politics that would later surround the partition. The 1919 Montagu-Chelmsford reforms introduced diarchy at the provincial level. This divided government subjects into two categories: reserved subjects, controlled by the British governor, and transferred subjects, managed by Indian ministers. While these reforms provided an appearance of democratic progress, the most vital executive powers remained restricted within the colonial reserved list. For the UPSC mains, the Government of India Act of 1935 is arguably the most essential pre-independence document to analyze. This act replaced the flawed provincial diarchy with provincial autonomy, granting provinces a greater degree of independent administrative power. It also established the framework for many modern administrative bodies, including a federal court and public service commissions. The Reserve Bank of India, which began its operations in 1935, was established under the legislative framework provided by this era of reform. The 1935 Act serves as the administrative skeleton of the modern state, proving that much of the republic's government structure was developed well before 1947. The 1947 Indian Independence Act finally ended British parliamentary authority, transferring full sovereign power to the Constituent Assembly. This assembly, whose members were indirectly elected based on the Cabinet Mission Plan, took on the task of drafting the nation's supreme law. The 1935 framework provided a robust administrative chassis. The resulting constitution was an act of precise grafting, placing global democratic ideals onto a deeply tested and established administrative skeleton. To conclude our timeline, 4 specific dates from the Constituent Assembly phase are essential for your preparation. The Assembly held its first meeting on December 9, 1946, with Dr. Rajendra Prasad eventually being elected as its permanent president. The drafting committee was formed on August 29, 1947, and the final text of the Constitution was formally adopted on November 26, 1949. The Assembly chose to bring the Constitution into force on January 26, 1950. This date was selected specifically to honor the 1930 Purna Swaraj Declaration. Understanding this 17-year progression from the 1773 Regulating Act to the 1950 Republic allows you to view the Constitution as a work of systemic engineering. This transition from identifying isolated facts to analyzing structural evolution is the primary requirement for the UPSC syllabus.